On behalf of the IIP, I want to thank you for joining our panel discussion on the complexities of the Black prosecutor. After this panel is over, we will post the full video as well as additional resources on the events page on our website, which will be linked in the chat. To stay up to date on all of our events, please follow us on our socials at IIP_JohnJ. We invite you to send questions throughout this panel. You can click the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to send your questions directly to the host. Now, at the IIP, we have adopted the practice of doing a living land acknowledgement before all of our events. This is specific to New York City, but we highly encourage all of our listeners to learn and acknowledge your local history wherever you may be. The IIP is based in New York City, which is Lenape-Hoking, the Lenape homeland. We honor all the indigenous nations and their land with great gratitude and acknowledge the genocide and continuous displacement of indigenous peoples. We also acknowledge the enslaved Africans whose labor built New York City during the colonial era and beyond. We acknowledge the harm inflicted upon the indigenous communities and people of color across the country, which inspires our ongoing work. So for today, our moderator is Erica Gillen Booker. Ms. Gillen Booker is currently a second-term president of the National Black Prosecutors Association, an organization dedicated to the retention and advancement of African-American prosecutors. Since 2008, she has served as NBPA's Vice President of Planning, Secretary, Vice President of Membership, Treasurer, and Great Lakes Regional Director. As a Cook County Assistant State's Attorney and appointed Special Assistant United States Attorney, Ms. Gillen Booker is assigned to the Special Prosecutions Unit. Prior assignments including composing legal briefs and arguing an oral argument before the Illinois Appellate Court and the Narcotics Bureau. She is a graduate of both the University of Baltimore Law School and the University of Chicago. Ms. Gillen Booker is admitted to both Illinois and United States Supreme Court. She is a former Minority League Education Resources Group leader, a program preparing students studying for the Illinois Bar Exam, co-chair of the 2021 National Black Prosecutors Association Conference and Job Fair, Lawyers in the Classroom instructor, and St. John Missionary Baptist Church Legal Ministry Coordinator. She is also a member of the Black Women Lawyers Association and Cook County Bar Association. And we are really excited to have her as our moderator today. So I will now turn it over to Mrs. Erica Gillen Booker. Thank you.
Good morning, family. On behalf of the National Black Prosecutors Association, I would like to thank the Institute for Innovation and Prosecution for allowing me to frame this very important conversation of the complexities of the Black prosecutor. Not only do we have chief prosecutors, assistants, and the legal community at large, but we also have the community as well. But I am so excited today to introduce three dynamic chief prosecutors who are making first in their very own right. Starting with District Attorney Santana DeBerry of Durham, North Carolina. She was sworn into office on January 1st of 2019 as District Attorney for the 16th Prosecutorial District in Durham County. She had no opponent during her election. Also, she manages a team of 40 legal professionals, including district attorneys, assistant district attorneys, legal support staff members, and a deputy chief administrator. D.A. DeBerry is a native of North Carolina. She was born and raised in Hamlet, which is Richmond County, North Carolina. She left home to pursue her undergraduate degree in studies at Princeton University and received her A.B. in sociology. She moved to Durham, attended law school at Duke University, where she earned her Juris Doctorate. She also received her master's in business administration from Duke University, and also sporting her chucks. I present to you D.A. Santana DeBerry. Also joining us today is District Attorney Mark Dupree of Wyandotte County, Kansas. Mark A. Dupree Sr. is a district attorney of Wyandotte County and leads an office of over 60 employees and manages a significant budget. D.A. DeBerry also has a team of employees in implementing strategic and visionary policies to expand the function of the Wyandotte County District Attorney's Office. He successfully recently created the first ever Conviction Integrity Unit in the state of Kansas, which is responsible for ensuring the convictions obtained previously still hold integrity today. His efforts for transforming the traditional manner in which the district attorney's office has operated has been recognized nationally. He is also a pastor, so his spirit of speaking to local schools is especially moving. Last but not least is State's Attorney Monique Worrell of the 9th Judicial District in Florida. Monique Worrell is the newest to the gang, and she is State's Attorney for the 9th Judicial Circuit Court for the state of Florida. She is the second African-American female in this position after Aramis Ayala. She was hired October 21st of 2020, and when Aramis Ayala decided not to seek re-election, she ran and was elected in November of 2020. And was sworn in January 5th of 2021, where she serves as chief prosecutor. She is the second African-American elected as state's attorney and the first of Caribbean descent. Monique is an accomplished criminal district attorney with experience as a leader, educator, advocate, administrator. Prior to being elected as state's attorney, she served as chief legal officer at a non-for-profit focused on criminal justice reform. So we have a very, very dynamic panel today. And I want to start out by, we all have people from different jurisdictions today, different sizes. I come from Cook County in Chicago, where we are the second largest in the country under Kim Foxx, who was our first African-American female to lead the second largest office in the country. Now, to allow us to better understand your perspective, give us an overview, and this is for everyone. Give us an overview of your jurisdiction and your office. What is the tone, percentage of prosecutors, Black prosecutors, and the jurisdictional makeup?
I'll get started and go in alphabetical order. So I have an office of about 50 people that is about equally split between prosecutors and support staff. I would say the majority of people in my office are African American, but that is because I have a large number of support staff people, associated legal professionals who are Black and who are women, quite frankly. Most of our legal assistants are women, our administrative staff are women. And as far as my prosecutors, about a quarter of the prosecutors in my office are African American. My jurisdiction is about 40% African American. So it's a, kind of historically a Black town, a Black county. And so we have a large representation of African Americans, not just in my office, but in the judicial system at large in our district. Our senior resident Superior Court judge is Black. Our chief district court judge is Black. Our chief public defender is Black. Our sheriff is Black. Our chief of police is Black. We have we have about 17 law enforcement agencies, but we have one very large one that does most of law enforcement for the county, and that's the Durham Police Department. Chief of the Durham Police Department is a Black woman. And in our county as a whole, we have 23 elected women of color. We have, I live in a jurisdiction that has about 100 years of Black political power.
Okay. Mr. Dupree?
So thank you for that leadership and concern of making sure we go by last name. And so having said that, so I'm Mark Dupree, and it's a pleasure to be on here. I want to say thank you to all of the folks who put this together. It's a pleasure to be a part of this distinguished panel. I must say that it feels good to be a minority of minorities on this screen. And so that is exciting to see. So demographics here in Kansas City, Kansas, we have a third African-American, a third Hispanic, and a third Caucasian as far as the population. Concerning the office, about 18% of that make up African American and Latino folks who are attorneys in the office. And I'll break that down a little bit more as we go through this panel today. I grew up here in this town, grew up here in Wyandotte County in the inner city, was excited to jump and get involved in the criminal justice system on the positive side because I saw so much on the other side. As stated earlier, I'm a pastor, and my parents were pastors of the church that I now pastor when I was growing up. And so we saw hands-on victims of crime, while at the same time, we saw doers of crime, and all of them would come to the altar for prayer. Funny story behind that. Nonetheless, it was like, okay, now what can we do beyond that just of prayer? And that came into getting involved in the criminal justice system, becoming a prosecutor after being a criminal defense lawyer for some time, and really trying to make sure that victims as well as defendants of all races, ethnicities, and backgrounds are all treated fairly and equitably within the criminal justice system.
Thank you. State's Attorney Royale.
Yes, well, good morning, everyone. And I am so honored to be able to join the crowd as well as the conversation. As we mentioned before we started, we are increasing that number of Black women elected prosecutors across the country, and I am very honored to be a part of this group. My office is comprised of about 400 staff members, 170 of them slated to be lawyers. I say slated because I currently have 37 vacancies. So if anybody wants to come and help me do this, please apply within. But 19% of our population here in Central Florida, our population is about 1.7 million people. 19% of that population is African American. 50% of our prison population, however, is also African American. So you can see the disparities, and I know we'll get to that later. Proudly, though, here in the office, about 22% of our prosecutors are also African American. So I think we are doing well in that we are above the representation here in the community. But when I begin to look at that, number, I think back to the question that was asked of the late Honorable Ruth Bader Ginsburg when they said, well, how many will be too many women on the Supreme Court, right? And she said, well, of course, when there are 9. So I don't think that we can get to a place where we have too many. I think that that lends to diversity when we have a history, right, that's exact opposite of that. And I know we'll get into some more of the complexities, but I had to be very careful in selecting my executive staff, ensuring that there was a right amount of diversity so that I would not be accused of the type of segregation that we've seen historically, especially in prosecutors' offices.
Thank you. Now, this panel is about the complexities of the Black prosecuting, including the issues that we face day to day. So a day in the life of a Black prosecutor may mean when you come to court and the defense attorney may not directly speak to you because they don't believe that you're the lead prosecutor on the case, or you may be mistaken as a clerk or a defendant. These are the issues that we face prosecuting while Black, if you will. So what are the complexities that you face as a chief prosecutor? And we'll continue to go in order. What are some of the complexities that you face? District Attorney DeBerry.
So this is my 27th year in the practice of law. And at the beginning of my career, I was a criminal defense attorney for a few years. And so I have experienced a whole range of passive aggressive, fully aggressive microaggressions as a lawyer. You know, I've been stopped from going through the lawyer's entrance in the courthouse. I've been asked by bailiffs to move from behind the bar. I have been, I was on a panel last week, and I recounted where I was trying a case, and at the end of the case, the judge presented to me a 10-page handwritten on legal pad letter that he had written to me from the bench about everything that he thought I was doing wrong and how he thought I was doing a disservice to the profession. So I have experienced certainly every aggression. And so I think as a chief prosecutor, I've gotten less of that. Part of that is, again, I've been practicing law for 27 years. There's a certain way after you've been doing this for a little while that certainly you just carry yourself and people know you. And I ran for office in, my jurisdiction is about 350,000 people. That's not, certainly not Central Florida, but it's not a small town. But it is a small enough jurisdiction where, I'm kind of almost like a cartoon character. I got gray hair and these glasses and my chucks. And so people know me when they say, I live here. I go to the grocery store, people know me when they see me. So I experience kind of less of that obviousness. What I say I do experience a lot of is she can't do that. So when I change a policy, when I make a plea offer, when I say I'm going to do something, a lot of people are initially like, well, she can't do that. So I ain't even worried about it because she can't do that. And then when I do it, they're like, wait a minute, and there is a lot of power sitting in the hands of a prosecutor. In North Carolina, district attorney has 100% discretion in determining which cases move forward through indictment, through trial. And often I think people, depending on the personality of the particular prosecutor, depends on how far they're willing to use that discretion. I'm willing to use all of my discretion because I look at this job as I only have 4 years. And so we have to accomplish what we can accomplish to not just keep people safe in our community, but to move forward to a more fair and effective and equitable justice system. And so I'm willing to use all of my discretion in service to that. And so, people doubt whether or not, and so that is for me, what has been the most challenging part is how many people try to tell me what my job is.
Okay, thank you. District Attorney Dupree.
Thank you. I'll follow up on the tail end of that statement, which is you can't do that. I recall when I first got into office, and I'll tell you just by way of context, Wyandotte County has had 3 district attorneys throughout its history. And the 2 previous before me were Caucasian man. The first one was there for 32 years, and following him was his number 2, who was there for an additional 12 years, having served with him for 25. And then it's important to note that they had chose the nephew of one of those to take over. And then here comes Dupree, the preacher out of nowhere, and he wins this election, and it makes everybody mad. So when I get in there, the thought is surely, 1, this is a mistake. 2, he doesn't know what he's doing. And so when I began to talk about policy changes and doing things that I see folks out there in Florida doing, folks in Philly doing, folks in Texas, I'm like, hey, you know what? We're going to make this happen in the dot. And when I began to try to do this, the number one thing I got was, that's not possible. And the thought process that many of them had was that it's not possible, 1, because he's Black, and 2, because it's never been done before. Because traditional prosecution is a reactive mindset, and we're simply throwing them away and locking them up as long as we can. So this going to school, being proactive, looking at the underlying issues, conviction integrity unit. What? Wait a minute. And so I recall when I did propose a conviction integrity unit, I had the Fraternal Order of Police, the police chief of the largest policing union or policing department here, the sheriff of the local Wyandotte County Sheriff's Department, and both union reps. They all expressed to me that I couldn't do what I was going to do. But more importantly, here's the catch. They then wrote a letter to my white attorney general, who is of a different party, and writes to him and says to him, surely this boy couldn't do what he's doing. And so we need you to come and oversee him and take this ability away. And so I waited patiently. And then the white attorney general of a different party wrote a letter and said exactly what I had said to them. And then they accepted it. And so what I found is that it's kind of like the child who goes to mommy for one thing, and mommy says no, but then they try to go to daddy and see if daddy's going to get tripped up. And so with me, it was, we know that he's the chief law enforcement official in the county. However, we want to have someone else who looks like us, who looks more of the traditional par to give us an answer concerning what the law says we can and can't do. And so I found that throughout many policy changes and many of the processes that we've gone through. And the other side of that, right, the complexity of this thing is, so I get it from the traditional law enforcement that you can't do it, but then I get from the inner city, my wonderful Black and brown folks that I grew up with, that I see all the time at the church, that say amen, who throw a towel as a preacher, who then says, how can you be a part of the system as a prosecutor and still be a preacher and still say that you're a part of the core of the Black and brown community? And so having to break the process down to them and explain that, look, folks, we can't all be outside the system and expect change, but we have to be in the system to bring about a change of the thought process to really make change happen. And so I get it on both sides, but at the end of the day, that's why we are where we are, is knowing how to walk that line, knowing how to push against the stereotypes, regardless of who it comes from and what it looks like. You stand for right and you stand for justice.
Preacher Dupree. State's Attorney Royale.
Y'all would make me have to follow a preacher now. You just, it's not fair. I don't like it. DA DeBerry, I don't appreciate your lineup. We could have done this differently. We could have gone, I don't know, even if we had gone by first names, I guess I'd still be following the preacher. So, all right, let me walk in my inevitability here. Speaking of walking in shoes, though, I'm walking in the shoes of the great Aramis Ayala, the Black woman who they told she couldn't do that by every step that she took, the one who the governor came in and was like, well, I am going to show you that you can't do that, and did take cases away from her. So that put me in a position as the Black woman to follow the Black woman who they showed that she couldn't do that. That everything that I do, they want to question. I'm currently rolling out a policy in my office right now, and I have prosecutors in-house saying that we're uncomfortable because you're going to be asking us to do things that are illegal. Why would you think that it was illegal? Well, it's not legal for you to do the things that you're doing. I'm sorry, you all use your discretion all the time to up charges. Why can we not use that same discretion to de-escalate charges, right? It's because of who is asking them to do it. So certainly the question of knowledge and ability are at the forefront every day. But for me, I come from a unique background in that I am a career defense attorney. The time that I spent as a prosecutor was when I began the Conviction Integrity Unit under Aramis Ayala. And because of that, they don't think that I am capable. There are many people in this office and in the community who don't believe that I am competent to be the elected state attorney here in this jurisdiction. Despite the fact that I've been an attorney practicing law for 20 years, despite the fact that for 16 of those 20 years, I was a professor at the #1 law school in the state of Florida, despite the fact that I served as chief legal officer for a nationally renowned nonprofit organization focused on criminal law. My qualifications are constantly in question. During the campaign, my opponents were dismissive of me as even an opponent. They would not even recognize me or take me seriously until the community was like, well, hey, wait a minute now, this is something different and we like it. right? But I remember being in debates with my opponent where they would, be dismissive and they'd laugh at ideas and concepts that I had. One of my opponents specifically was like, that's the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. To which I was able to respond, that's the problem. Because it's never been done does not mean that it cannot be done. It just means that you won't do it because it's never been done. So to give you a real personal example though, just last week, I walked into the courthouse because I was invited to attend an event that was taking place. And as I walked into the courthouse, walking towards where I was going, I was stopped by the court deputy. He was like, well, where are you going? I was like, I'm the state attorney. And it wasn't until the police chief who was I was walking with came through, was I able to get access to my own courthouse because I didn't look the part. So, these disparities, I think as Black prosecutors and attorneys, we will see until we get to a place in our society where we actually equalize things and see that fairness and equitable treatment that we're all fighting for.
So DA Dupree touched on something very important, talking about being able to effectuate change from the inside. And that is the best way to effectuate change, is to have a seat at the table, actually. And this question is for DA DeBerry. What do you say to those who don't believe that you can achieve a meaningful change within the system?
I think Dupree may have already answered this. There's an inside game and an outside game. And so for most of my career, I've been an advocate. I've played an outside game. I have pushed against, the centers of power to expand access for communities of color and low-income people. I've lobbied at both the lowest and highest levels of government for expansions of opportunities for people. And, it has always been, well, maybe we'll get you next time, right? It's always been incremental change. And because you grow up in a system in which all you see is incremental change, that is what you become accustomed to. Just kind of the mundanity of pushing for, all right, we'll have a stretch goal and then we'll have what we think can happen. And as I thought about running for this office, it occurred to me that if I was sitting in the seat, I could make different decisions, right? Instead of being the person always pushing at the door, I get to be the person behind the door. And for anybody who tells you that there is not a difference between being on the other side of the door and being the person making the decisions, I will tell you that's a person who's never been in the position to make the decisions. And I'm not saying that in a bad way or a dismissive way. I am saying that there is power in the system. We have the system that we have. Certainly there are many of us who are working to change that system and to have a new system, and they're working on that from the outside, and that is powerful work. It is certainly work that we as African Americans are used to doing, that we've been doing for 400 years. But it is amazing how quickly things can change when you make the decisions. DA Dupree talks about, people going to the attorney general. People are always looking for my boss, right? You can't be the one, but I'm the one, right? So.
State's Attorney Worrell, how do you reconcile the nature of the job, although you're new to the game? How do you reconcile the nature of the job and its impacts on communities of color, specifically Black communities?
One of the criticisms that I heard over and over again was that I was a racist and that I was only interested in how the system could better the lives of African Americans. And what's interesting about that criticism is that when we get a criminal justice system that is fair and just for everyone, it will inherently benefit African Americans because African Americans have been the ones that have been disenfranchised by the system historically. So that must seem racist. Equality must seem racist because yes, I do want to elevate the treatment of African Americans in the criminal legal system, but it's not that I only want to elevate, it's that they are the ones who are treated the worst. So by making the system fair and equitable for everyone, African Americans are the ones who seek to benefit most from those changes. And that's really my answer is once we have a fair and just system, the Black community will benefit from the fair and just system.
Now, speaking of benefits, District Attorney Dupree, last year you resigned from the Trump Police Commission and you penned a letter during that resignation to former U.S. Attorney William Barr, indicating that you believe the commission's work was smothered by a pernicious political agenda. Now, what do you say, at least to the community who thinks that you're part of the problem and don't have the community's best interest, which is clearly not the case with that letter?
What I say to them is keep living. That's what my mother used to say to me when you don't understand something and you're quick to have an opinion, just keep on living and someday you'll get it. With that particular commission, the focus was to try to do something better, try to figure out how we can fix this thing. And as stated earlier, you have to try to get in where you can fit in. The problem is throughout the entire criminal justice system. There is systemic racism throughout the entire system. In every aspect, in every category of the system, we have to be involved to try to fix it. Once you get involved and you try to fix it and you see that clearly it's not a fixable thing with this group, or you have, back in the day they used to say you're stunting, right? You're stunting. When you find a group of folks who are saying they really want to be about criminal justice reform, and then you get in the room and you see they're full of stuff. And they're stunting, then you call it A's and A's. You call it what it is. And the fact is, in that particular situation, here's where I'm at. This is where my faith stands up. I believe that I get to talk to God every day without anyone in between. And so my thought is, regardless if I'm talking to President Trump or President of Uganda, if you're doing wrong, I'm going to speak up and I'm going to say you're doing wrong, because what is right for one group of people is right for the next group of people. And so we need to continue to speak up, be forward, and don't worry about the folks who don't understand, because at the end of the day, if you do it right, even the folks who don't understand will benefit from the process, despite the fact that you had to take the pain, you had to take the scar, you had to take the Facebook and social media attacks, and my goodness, whatever else comes, it doesn't matter. If you are called for this position, it is to bring about positive change for everyone. And so one of the things I tell folks, even after this last campaign, is I'm your DA, right? I'm your DA, whether you voted for me or not. And so we have to have the mindset for those who agree with you and don't agree with you, those who understand you, those who don't, those who look like you, those who don't look like you. You have to represent all of them and keep pushing and striving for greatness.
Now, at the same time, because we do have a lot of line prosecutors, assistant prosecutors that are on the webinar today, and this is specifically for District Attorney DeBerry. We are in the trenches every single day in the courtrooms, talking to the officers, talking to our witnesses, and things of that nature. Now, what would you say to your line assistants and us line assistants, and we're grappling with our relationship, or not necessarily our relationship, but our ability to have a conversation and be able to prep our witnesses, so specifically with law enforcement, given the events of the past year?
Yeah, it's hard to, everybody doesn't, in my office, I'm the only person in my office that has the privilege of being the elected DA, right? I'm the only person who has the privilege of being bold, I guess. But what I do encourage my prosecutors to do is, one, they don't work for law enforcement. They work for the people of Durham County. And our goal is to be fair and just, and whether people like you or not, your mama loves you. She's gonna always love you. And so, you know, whatever you do here, I want you to do with integrity. And I want you to do the right thing. I tell the young prosecutors in my office all the time, you have to be the lawyer that you want to be. Right? You're the one who has the law license. Look, if something happens to my law license, I don't have any other skills, y'all. I'm flipping burgers at McDonald's. All right. So I understand that how I show up in the courtroom, how I show up every day is important. And so that's what I encourage them to do, is to do the right thing, use their discretion in the right way, you know, and to what both Monique and Mark have said, you know, at the end of the day, whether people like what we're doing or not, the goal is to create a fair and equitable system for everybody, right? And so what I want the people of Durham County to think is that if they, when they come down to the courthouse and they have some criminal matter, whether it is a traffic ticket, or they have a family member who's been a victim of homicide, or they themselves have been charged with that, is that they will be treated fairly. And that they will be treated equitably, and that who they know and how much money they make and the color of their skin is not going to influence how we determine that fairness and that equity. And so I try to always say that to my prosecutors. My door is always open. It's not open right now because we're on this webinar. But I always encourage them to come and talk to me about what's happening, and we try to work it out together.
Thank you. State's Attorney Worrell, recognizing that the Black community is not a monolith in your opinion, what do you think can be done to build the trust and the legitimacy within the Black community, and where have we failed in recent years?
We failed by sweeping things under the rug and pretending that some of these atrocities in our system aren't happening. When you look at just over this last year with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, specifically Ahmaud Arbery's case, had that video not been released to the public, what would have happened or would not have happened in that case? In the case of Breonna Taylor, I think that there are a lot of people who still don't believe that there was justice in that case. And in the case of George Floyd, we still have to see. So I think we failed by seeing atrocities such as these happen and not doing anything about them. I can tell you here in Central Florida, one of the things that has been stated is that, well, we've prosecuted law enforcement, we just can't get any convictions. Why? Why is it that when a state attorney's office believes that an officer has engaged in criminal conduct, it is impossible to obtain a conviction? So I believe that in order to reestablish trust, we have to get to the bottom of that why. We have to do something about it. We have to move forward with accountability and the safety of Black and brown men and women in the communities in which they live in, that we will stand up for that we will protect that, and that we will fight for fairness and equity in the decision-making in our system, in the cases that we charge, in the sentences that we seek. And I believe that only by doing that and being able to display the outcome of doing that, will we be able to regain that trust within the community.
Now, thank you. Speaking along the lines of trying to build trust within our community, District Attorney Dupree, how has your office been addressing the issues of implicit bias in the courtrooms and also among law enforcement?
So one of the things that we've done is given everyone the opportunity in our office to receive implicit bias training and encourage the entire courthouse and all law enforcement to do the same, many of which have, some have not. The buy-in is what's necessary. So I believe that seeing is believing. I was 14 years old when I first saw an African-American attorney. He was an African-American judge. Before then, I had never seen anyone that looked like me that was in the legal system in a positive way. Now, again, I had preachers in my family, but I didn't have lawyers in my family. I didn't have judges. And that one day shadow experience turned into a 7-year mentor-mentee relationship. And it exposed me to what the criminal justice system lacked. And what it lacked was more people of color in it. And so when I got into this office, there was only one African-American attorney. Now, there was quite a few Black and brown folks who were support staff, but there was no Black attorneys except for the one. And then after I won in the primary, they hired another. And they only hired another one because he got called out so bad that there was only one attorney. So seeing is believing. So what I did, as soon as I got in there, we started recruiting. You start looking. How do you deal with bias? Is that you give people a different perspective, give people a perspective that they can in no other way see or hear. And who else and who better can do that except for having people of color as attorneys in the courtroom, sitting and talking with the victims, sitting and talking with the judges, going back into those rooms. And so where we started with one, now we're up to, I believe, 8 or 9 African-American in my office. There's about 25 attorneys. And when I got here, there was about 6 openings. I didn't have the 30 as you did, state's attorney, but there were openings there. And so growing the amount of color that is seen in the courtroom as attorneys, as prosecutors, because that doesn't just affect the prosecutor's office, because we represent the state, we represent the people. And so now the interaction with our victims, the interactions with our defendants, the interactions with our courts, with the probation officers, with law enforcement, it begins to change what that dynamic looks like. So my hope and my goal is that, as I stated earlier, that we have a third, a third, and a third in the demographics of the community. We're the 4th largest county in our state. I want our bench to be a third, a third, a third. I want my office to be a third, a third, a third. I want probation officers to be a third, a third, a third, because that is the only way when we're talking about implicit bias. The fact is you got implicit bias, you got conscious bias and unconscious. You got some racist folks who are involved in this criminal justice system, and you have to give them some straight in your face change. And that is, people of color belong here just like everyone else. And so hopefully in the future, whenever I'm done being the DA, it won't be a surprise for a Latino to come in and be the first Hispanic district attorney for Wyandotte County, or the next African-American district attorney. How do we change the bias? We put it in the face and we let them know that what you saw on the news was fake news. But the reality is we're smart, we're competent, we're intellectual, and we can do a doggone good job at this job. And if you try to act racist, we're going to call you on it, because as the Barry said, I'm the one, I'll call you on it.
Now, District Attorney DeBerry, now Mark Dupree just talked about increasing that third, and third. And just to give you some, give our audience some percentages, in 2019, 2%, there are only 2% of elected prosecutors, and they are Black women. Only 3% of those are Black men. So that percentage is so small. It's elite, but it's very small. So it's very clear that the field of prosecutions is largely white male. How do we change that? How do we encourage more Black attorneys or individuals to even aspire to become chief prosecutors? How do we increase that percentage?
You know, that's a good question. this is not something that happens overnight. You know, you have to go law school, you know, so you have to set your intentions very far back in the game to get here. But I was watching Blackish the other night, and I heard Rainbow say that when Jackie Robinson was in Major League Baseball, it was only 6% Black. And that today, it's only 7% Black. And that he went through all he went through, he got spat on, the stress, he died at 54, blind and crippled from the stress of integrating baseball, for there only to be 7% Black players now, right? And that really struck me because, you know, what we hope we're doing is being out there, being the tip of the spear and creating room for other people to do this. But as you know, D.A. Dupree said, there are also people in our community for whom what we are doing is a betrayal. And so you are always going to have, and certainly State's Attorney Worrell, who has a career as a defense attorney, can probably tell you that she used to be the good guy, and now she's the bad guy, right? And and that is how our own community sometimes sees us. And so there may not be young lawyers out there who see us as something to aspire to, right? And I think we have to be honest about that. And that's why we do things like what we're doing right now, right? To talk about it. And I saw Monique raise her hand, so I'm gonna throw it to her.
Thank you. I just want to say, because as a law professor who ran the criminal justice practice program, I routinely told my Black students not to become prosecutors, okay? So it has to, I think, start there, because many people historically don't think that we can do any good here. I had one of my law professors speak at my inauguration, and he said, I've always told my students that there is no place for Black people as prosecutors. I want you to prove me wrong, is how he ended his speech. So I think it's changing the mindset that we can do good as prosecutors. And I'm telling you that I was that person for 16 years. I taught students that the only good you can do is as a defense attorney, without ever seeing the full grasp. As D.A. DeBerry said earlier, I am the person who makes the decisions. And if you don't truly understand what that means, then you cannot embrace how important it is for us to have a seat at that table. So I believe that it begins in education. Yes, definitely in legal education, as students are beginning to decide where they're going to go. But even before that, when they're in college and they're in high school, trying to determine what they want to be, because I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a defense attorney. So I think we have to get into education and start showing them what it looks like to be a Black prosecutor.
D.A. Dupree, I see you shaking like you need to answer that question. Do you need to answer the question, D.A. Dupree?
Well, since you asked, yes. Going back to what I said, seeing is believing. Seeing is believing. I did not know it was possible until I was exposed to it. And look, I was 14. And so what I did, once I figured this thing out and I seen it was possible, I got involved in it. But then what we did in my office, in fact, when I was a criminal defense lawyer, I'm gonna tell you this is something. I connected with the office that I'm now the DA for as a public defender, and I set up a shadow day experience with the prosecutor's office so that people in the inner city that look like me could come and meet the prosecutor and meet judges, because it exposed me when I was 14, which ultimately made me that defense lawyer, right? And so now what I didn't know is that I would set myself up after being a decade-long defense lawyer. I wasn't a bleeding heart, but I loved it, to ultimately become the DA and then expand that same shadow experience across not just my county, but into other regions, because we need to show Black, brown, and broke young boys and girls and families that you can be this, you can do this. You have to see yourself as the judge, the prosecutor, the chief of police, the mayor, not just the criminal or the defendant. But if you don't ever see it, it's hard for you to believe it. And then when you're running up against wonderful, awesome, dynamic professors who do and say what they did, we have to show them. You know, seeing is believing. So thank you for giving me that 30 seconds.
I saw you moving like you had to answer that question, T.A. Dupree, Pastor Dupree. This question is for everyone. What has been the climate and culture in your office after the senseless murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Daniel Prue, just to name a few? Starting with Santana DeBerry in order. What's been the culture in your office?
You know, people have been certainly upset, but certainly also not surprised, right? We also have people in our office who are partnered with law enforcement. And so we had a conversation about it, and we actually did, we've done a court-wide equity training with the Vera Institute's Motion for Justice program, where we talked about this. And so we are consistently talking about this in my office. I don't want anybody here to feel like they're the only person here, and we certainly don't want them to feel like they're the only people suffering.
I would agree with that. When it happened, the office was shocked, and everyone, we sat down, we had a conversation, you know, in pairs. We made sure that everyone had the opportunity to go and talk to someone, because sometimes it affects folks differently. I'll kind of segue into this. As a prosecutor and as an African-American prosecutor, it's important that we take care of ourselves, that we handle our mental health and our physical health. And this job can be stressful. And then when you see the things that we've seen across the country and within our own offices, when we think about the Floyd incident, it can bother you. And if you don't know how to deal with it, if you don't have an outlet to talk or to go pray or to run or whatever your outlet is, that's the number one thing that you need to do. And so I encouraged everyone in my office to do that. I'll tell you, I have a staff that is focused on holistic prosecution, who really believes in what we're trying to do here. And so white and Black and brown alike in my office, it affected everyone. And I seen my white attorneys talking and sitting talking with my Black attorneys, and my Black attorneys sitting and talking, and really dissecting this thing, not just based off of the law, but on the psychological aspect of things. And so it really brought some clarity to the reality of what we have a responsibility to do in our roles.
And it sounds like you've implemented some kind of program or some kind of outlet in the office to deal with that.
Yes, and that is making sure that everyone knows it is free for you to go and sit and talk to this therapist. It's free for you to go and sit and talk to this psychologist. I mean, because look, if they're not good concerning their mental health when they come into the office, it's not going to be good for any case that we assign them to. And Lord forbid, when we deal with corruption, or we deal with a wrongful conviction, we deal with a blatant racist officer, you know. And so that's our number one thing. I'll send you home if you haven't gotten some type of help. And for some people, again, that's not going to talk. Some people, that is just literally going up to the altar. Well, you need to go to the altar, or you need to go to the tennis court. Take your day off. We're going to pay you to go and take care of yourself so that you can handle all of the stuff, because it's going to happen again. It's going to come, and we're going to be here, and we're going to have to deal with it. And we have to be in the right mind to deal with it.
State's Attorney
real quickly in response to that, this is also, I think, one flip side of you know, what people call in criminal justice reform or progressive prosecution. is that as we move to being focused on just serious crimes and violent crimes, the work that we do gets harder, not easier, right? I can do traffic tickets all day and go home and sit on my deck and chill, right? But if what I want to do as an office is really focus on the things that keep us unsafe, that means I'm doing really bad things all day. And that for the people that I see during the day, I am a reminder of the worst day of their lives, right? So it's very important then for me to take care of my mental health and for the people who work here to take care of their mental health. Because to every day be dealing with somebody who's dealing with the person who represents the worst day of their lives is, very quickly going to become some of the worst days of your life.
State Attorney Worrell, I see you shaking your head. Can you answer the question as well? And also as to some programs that are being implemented to help our line prosecutors.
So I'll say that all happened while I was a candidate, not the state attorney. So that's interesting. And what I'll say is that when I did my pre-interviews after I won my primary in August and in between my general in November, and I met with some of the prosecutors in the office, part of the reason that those who supported me did so is because of those incidents. They used those as reasons that we need to move towards reform in our system. However, I'll tell you, since I've become state attorney, I really haven't seen a whole lot of people hit by that in my office. It's not really for the majority of the people who work here, it's not something that weighs heavily on them. It's not something that they need help managing or dealing with. And I think all that does is help me see who are the people who can humanize the individuals that we're dealing with every day that we call defendants, and who are the ones that we can't. So to that end, we haven't set up any programs, but I don't see a need for programs like that here at this time.
DA DeBerry spoke about progressive prosecution, and this question is to all of the panelists. Do you think that progressive prosecution means being softer on crime?
No.
Anyone else? This to all the panelists.
No, I mean, that's what they said. That's what they said when I ran. They said that's what it meant. But I think anyone who understands the concept, and I'm going to be doing some education for my staff so that I can explain what reform really means, because I believe that a lot of my staff believes that that's what it means. But no, absolutely not. That's not what it means. It means exactly what DA DeBerry said, which is focusing on the things that really matter, right? Focusing on the things that really are an impediment to our safety as a community. And most of the things that we prosecute are not.
Now, we talk about innovative prosecution, and that means creating the newly conviction integrity unit, and also programs such as teen court and declining to prosecute school referrals as you did in your office, DA DeBerry. Why do you think it's important to examine these age-old policies that contributed to this systemic racism, but also what programs do you have in place that will contribute to dismantling what's going on today?
The number one indicator of your involvement in the criminal justice system is previous involvement in the criminal justice system, especially while you're a child. Whether that means your personal involvement, whether or not you had a parent who had involvement in the criminal justice system, or you live in a community that has high criminal justice involvement. I don't want anybody to come to the courthouse ever, unless they unless they choose to get married here, right? Unless it's a joyful day, unless I want most of the people in my community not to ever walk through these doors. And so you know, it is important for us, and I have limited resources. You know, a comparable jurisdiction of comparable size to mine would have twice as many people working in the office as I have, right? So our resources, we want to be focused on, again, the crimes that keep us unsafe, and we also live here, right? I have 3 kids, 2 of whom are still in the public schools here. One who's a freshman, and I have to give a shout out to the North Carolina Central University, Eagle Pride, right? And so I want this community to be as safe as possible, right? And so, you know, for example, we have not taken a school-based referral in 2 years. So even pre-COVID, even before there was virtual learning, as we understand the real impact of being criminalized at a young age. We understand the real impact of losing your driver's license, not just on that person, but on us as a community, right? Because if I get hit by somebody who's uninsured because they can't get a driver's license, I got a problem. And so creating these programs is not an attempt to be softer on crime or to not, we are always about holding people accountable. We just don't always think accountability means being separated from your family by going to prison. I mean, for some people, that's what it means, unfortunately. Right? And for some people, that is the only thing that the law allows. But when we do have discretion, we use that discretion. So I'm not sure if I answered the question or I got on the soapbox, but
You did. Jay Dupree.
So I'll try to pretend like I remember your question. And I was listening to DA DeBerry's not soapbox, and so programs that we have created, I think, right? And so I like listening to other prosecutors, state's attorneys, because they do things that I may want to bring to Wyandotte County, and some of the things that she said, I'm absolutely taking notes. I don't consider it stealing. I just call it borrowing. I'll change the name and make it look like it was mine, though. I'll give you a heads up on it. So what we've created several things, right? We've created the Conviction Integrity Unit, looking at old convictions and trying to figure out some of the mistakes of the past. And here's the reality. I think one of the biggest holdbacks that we have is prosecutors, Black or white, not accepting responsibility and acknowledging that we've made mistakes in the past. Any system that's run by humans, it's prone to error because humans are flawed and we're flawed people. So whether we do it consciously or unconsciously, mistakes are made. Now, historically in this country, we know that there has been quite a few conscious mistakes made toward African Americans and the convictions and so on and so forth. So in my book, it's not good enough simply to acknowledge the wrongs of the past and to say we're sorry. We have to do something to correct those wrongs. And if we've wrongfully imprisoned folks, let's get them out of prison, not just send them a Dear Jane letter or we're sorry, but get them out so they can be reconnected with those families, so they can have the ability to father that child that they have to go away with. The other programs that we encourage and really put together, we go to every school. We go to the middle schools, the high school, the elementary schools. We have a BOLD program, BOLDD. Yes, I know it's not spelled with 2 Ds, but for the sake of my acronym, I added one. Preachers are allowed to do that. Brilliant, outstanding leaders determined to be the difference. And so with that BOLD program, we mentor students and allow the students to come in and shadow us and encourage them to become lawyers. We allow high school and middle school students as well as college students to shadow us. With our recent situations with all of the killings and the George Floyd incident, we connected with the community and we expanded our conviction integrity unit to a community integrity unit, which now allows community members to bring their complaints concerning any law enforcement officer in Wyandotte County to the DA's office for us to do an independent investigation of that complaint. It does two things. One, it gives the community the ability to know that it's not going to be a home-cooked investigation. Many times you're telling the community who has a complaint or an issue with an officer to go to the same place that they're working to make that complaint, right? And for their colleagues, their friends to do that investigation. Well, we now handle those investigations and we then determine whether or not there was some type of violation. And of course, if there's criminal charges, we'll file those charges. But if there's not criminal charges, but we still found that there was a violation of the general orders for that law enforcement officer, then we keep that information and we let the agency know about it, and we're allowed to let the community to see that data and to know ultimately who's your good officers and who's your not so good officers, so we won't have to wait until one of them kill someone in our community to deal with it. And so it's dealing with programs like that. We have several others, but ultimately it's about connecting with the voices of the community. We've created the community liaison board, the faith-based liaison board, as well as the retired and former law enforcement liaison board, to allow these community members to come in quarterly, sit down, talk with me, give me their input, both good and bad and ugly, on what they feel, but to get that input so that we can continue to do what is necessary for the community, not simply what we want to do.
All right, so we're going to take a couple of questions from our audience members. First question would be, do you have a restorative justice program, and how you decide whether someone is eligible for the program?
We have an extensive restorative justice program. We use it on everything from misdemeanors. I think we've had at least one homicide go through our restorative justice program. The way we look at it is we also have a criminal justice book club in our office, and we read together the Danielle Surratt book, Until We Reckon. And that was really powerful for us as an office, because victims often say, you know, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? Prosecutors are hammers, and we don't have but so many tools. And prison is our, the tool we have. And for victims, especially victims of serious crime, the court process is the last thing that they do. And they often feel like they didn't get what they needed from that process. And so we don't look at the restorative justice process as the only accountability. Certainly in the homicide case in which we used it, that defendant did go to prison, but he had been convicted of killing a member of his family, and his family still wanted. They couldn't forget that he was a part of their family, right? And not so much that some of them, it's not that they all wanted to forgive him, but they all couldn't they all knew what had happened, and they needed to have some ability for him when he came out of prison to be able to come back to their family. And so we use it in a variety of ways to provide. Both the victim and the defendant have to agree, and we use it in ways to provide the victims with getting what they need. They often want to know, why'd you do this to me? Or they want to say, don't do this to somebody else. But the way that folks get into that in our office is we have some team members who coordinate that work, and the prosecutors can go to the coordinators and talk to them. They identify cases that they think are appropriate for restorative justice, and people know that we do it now, and victims sometimes ask for it.
DA Dupree, what resources and support have been most helpful to you in your role leading your jurisdiction?
I think for me, the number one resource that has been the most beneficial is the community involvement. Growing up here in my community, we did not know anything about the criminal justice system except to stay away from it. We only heard and saw the negative. You know, mama, daddy taught you, boy, if you ever get arrested, I ain't bailing you out. And so you try not to get arrested. And so thankfully, she never had to bail me out. Point being is, when the community began to be told what was happening, began to be educated on really what progressive prosecution means, what holistic prosecution means, what moving forward with dealing with drug court and mental health court and all of these things, when they began to be educated of the many tools that we have at our disposal and how it can positively affect the entire community, as well as bring about justice for the victims, then many of them began to get involved. Many of them began to join the different boards that I spoke of earlier. And many of the activist groups within the community start setting meetings with me and forming collaborative partnerships on how to move things forward. I recall the Conviction Integrity Unit, as well as the push for the independent investigations for officer-involved shootings. The activist groups came around and asked me what my thought was, and then they took my thoughts and they went to the community and really began to spread what we believe was best. And so for me, it is the community involvement and that community voice that really forces politicians, because all of our budgets have to be passed by somebody. And in my county, it's our commissioners, and all of our commissioners are elected. And many of those commissioners were not fans or a fan of Dupree when I ran against the status quo. And so the community being able to speak up and saying, this is what we want, it forced those politicians to pass my budget, because then they were quickly realized that if we don't, then I may not get voted back in. And so community involvement, community participation, I think is the most vital part and has been throughout my terms.
State's Attorney Worrell, what advice would you give panelists, to panelists who are understanding progressive prosecution, and this is for a new line attorney in the office, but they aren't completely on board with progressive prosecution? What would you say to them?
Want to be regressive? I guess I would say to anyone in my office who brought that question to me, progressive prosecution isn't something that should be strange or something that should be forced, because as a prosecutor, you are an advocate for justice. And the only thing that being a progressive prosecutor means is recognizing that justice doesn't always mean incarceration, that justice requires fairness and equity. That's it. That's all being a progressive prosecutor means. That we recognize the errors of our past, that we recognize that we lost the war on drugs so that we should try to do something differently, that we recognize that if we don't do something different, then we are destined to make the same mistakes. So I don't understand how you can not be on board with that.
Now, on the same line, because we don't have, a lot of offices don't have dynamic leaders such as yourself and DA DeBerry and Dupree as well. So what about those line ASAs that don't have those strong leaders, like that elite percentage that we have that we need to increase?
Come work for one of us, because we really need your help.
Hey. Okay.
And I'm hiring right now. You can send me your resume to State Attorney Monique Worrell at sao9.org.
DA Dupree, what just happened?
I don't appreciate her putting her stuff out there like that. I can give y'all all of my information. We need some more folks in Kansas. Come on. And I just filled my last 2 spots. But listen, send it to me anyway. Send it to me anyway. We'll create some more spots.
He's asking for stuff he doesn't even need. I have 20 vacancies and the weather here is really nice. While it's snowing in the rest of the country, would you like to see my palm trees here?
Do not show us your palm tree. You just made me mad. You ain't right for that.
So another question, how do you suggest, and this is for actually DA DeBerry, how do you suggest dealing with white supervisors that may not be so progressive?
For a line prosecutor?
Yes, they're dealing with a supervisor.
Yeah. State's Attorney Worrell has 37 positions open. Listen, you don't ever have to deal with somebody who treats you badly. I don't care if you are in, I don't care what kind of relationship you are in with that person, whether it be a personal relationship or professional relationship. There's always somebody who will think that you are amazing. All right. And so what I encourage you to do is, if you are dealing in your professional life with, look, I've had bad bosses myself. I try not to be a bad boss now, but I've certainly probably been a bad boss before, because you learn as you get wiser, as you get older. Move on.
Can you tie that into final remarks, please?
My final remarks are, we are the ones we've been waiting for, right? We have the opportunity for change. If we've learned anything from the last 4 years, and we have learned that anybody who is dedicated to doing what they want to do can do it, right? And so, and what we've learned from this last election is that people who are motivated for change can get change. And so I would encourage all the line prosecutors out there, if you are absolutely qualified to be the elected prosecutor, and set yourself up. Go do that. Reach out to any of us. Certainly now there are more of us. Certainly, all of the Black ones, we all know each other. So you can reach out to us. But we also have allies out there who are not Black. They're Latinos. They're white, both white men and women who are also on this journey. And reach out to one of them, and be the change you want to see in the world.
DA Dupree, Pastor Dupree.
Well, blessings to you. I appreciate indeed this honor of speaking and being a part of this panel. And so I would say in my closing to all of you, kudos to you. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep on pushing through. I was a line prosecutor at one point. I haven't always been the elected. And so sometimes it's tough, sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes you got to swallow rather than talk. But in due season, you'll have your opportunity to talk. But I agree, you need to set yourself up. Figure out what you want to do. Figure out what your calling is. And if that is to be the chief law enforcement official, don't be afraid. Do it. The only way you can do it is to step out. And look, the odds may be against you. I was literally told when I put my name out there to run that it wasn't my turn and that I needed to fall in line, and then maybe down the road, the party would back me. Well, I didn't know who the party was. The only party I knew was my family and God. And so that's who we went with. And apparently greater is he that was in me. Anyway, we won. But what I'm trying to say to all of you is to stay focused, is to keep pushing, regardless what it feels like, regardless what it looks like. We have released 2 individuals who were wrongfully convicted, and I'm very proud of that. It's never happened before in this county. The first young man that was released was after 26 years. I was 13 when he went to prison. He had to wait 26 years for me to swallow my fear and stand up and fight against the odds to become the DA. And ultimately, I held the keys to his freedom. There is somebody who is waiting to be released, but you're holding the key. Forget your fear, forget your doubt, stand up and go forward. Thank you for this opportunity and be blessed.
Thanks, Attorney
We
Royale.
need some organs. We need some organs. I need some organs right now. You know, I was looking for a really cool quote from someone else, but I'll give you one from me. Do what matters. Someone's justice is depending on you. I didn't think I could do this, and neither did many people in my community. I remember one of the first people that I spoke to saying to me, "Ma'am, I'm sure you're a very nice lady, but there is no way in hell that you can win this election." Well, I did, and here I am, and now it's time for me to do something with that. I'm not just here to say I'm here. One thing that Aramis Ayala said to me is that I did not get this seat to do what has always been done. I have a responsibility to do more, because then why be here? So do what matters. Someone's justice is depending on you. As DA Pastor Dupree said, that he was able to hand someone their justice that otherwise would not have received it. Although it wasn't created in under my administration, I developed the Conviction Integrity Unit here in Central Florida, who has recently handed individuals their freedom that they wouldn't have otherwise received because of the obstructionists that stand in the way of achieving true justice. So then I say to all of you, are you going to be bold enough? Are you going to be brave enough to do what matters? Because there is someone's justice who's waiting for you.
Thank you so
Can I
much.
say one more thing? I also want all of y'all out there to start referring to yourself in the third person, like Dupree, because that apparently, that's what I'm gonna start doing, because there seems to be power in that, okay? So next, I'm gonna start practicing in the mirror, calling myself D-Berry, because I wanna be like the Reverend when I grow up.
Maybe pull out my sweat towel.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. I mean, given these dismal percentages, we can only imagine, and we know how hard it is to plow through the treacherous paths of enlightenment, trying to repeat the obvious, trying to correct those systemic ills, and just basically putting those on notice. And it's very clear that being in the minority is physically draining. I mean, these are the actual complexities that we face every single day, prosecuting while Black, basically. And that's why it's important that we have these affinity groups, specifically National Black Prosecutors Association, because what we're continuing to do is increase visibility through enrichment, engagement, and empathy. And this is important because it reignites those themes of being the gatekeepers of justice. We're the voice of the voiceless. We also represent the rights of the accused and the accuser. And that's very, very important. These themes reign true every single day. I want to say thank you to our panelists because the work that you do is very important. These complexities are real, and it's something that we face every single day. I also want to thank the legal community. Thank you for tuning in. And I certainly hope that you learned something today and stay healthy, happy, mentally sane, and masked up. Bye, everyone.